Hi everyone, this is Natalie Ellis with ESTEEM Counseling and Consulting Services, and welcome to Ask the Therapist. And today is June 17th, 2020. So we are moving along in the year of 2020. There's lots of jokes out there saying 2020 is just not the year for anybody and they're ready for the year to be over. Well, it seems like the year is moving on fairly quickly. Despite everything that's been happening, it's moving on really, really fast. So as much as we can, definitely be intentional, be mindful, be aware of our time, because time waits for no one. It just keeps going despite everything that's going on around us. And so I just wanted to, not sure if it showed up, I did a title for this, but the topic that I'm going to talk about is 10 ways you can support someone with mental illness or someone struggling with mental health or someone who's experienced some type of trauma. Again, for the last 90 days, we've been in this turmoil. There's been lots of things happening around us, from the pandemic, COVID-19, the quarantine, just lots of unprecedented situations, or more so within the last 100 years. We've had pandemics before. We've had protests before, and of course these protests. We've had a lot of these things that's happening. These things has happened before, but it maybe not to this magnitude at this time and within the last 50 years in regards to protests, and maybe 100 plus years for the pandemic. And so there's just lots going on. And with lots going on around us, it brings up a lot of emotional things. It brings up a lot of stuff for individuals. And so again, I just wanted to kind of talk about briefly just ways that you can support those that you love, ways you can support people around you that may be struggling with their own mental illness, that's struggling with their mental health, or that may be experiencing trauma, right? So in regards to trauma, there's different kinds of trauma that could happen. Things that could happen to us directly and vicariously, or secondary trauma. So listening to the news and everything that we see when we watch the videos of certain things, again, those could create some traumas with us, and we just need to be aware and mindful of that. And so mental illness, mental health, trauma, with all of these different things, there's symptoms. Depression can be symptoms, anxiety symptoms, paranoia, fear, right? And so these feelings become overwhelming depression, overwhelming anxiety, overwhelming fear, hopelessness, helplessness, right? So a lot of people are struggling with all of these emotions. They're not knowing what to do, feeling lack of motivation. And again, when someone is diagnosed with mental illness, then there's obviously additional layers of things to be mindful of. And so with all of these things happening and all of these emotions going around, how can we help? How can we help those around us so that we can be a support to them? And so in doing research and kind of looking up different things, these are 10 things that I came up with from everything I've read, real simple things that we can do, right? And so, but a lot of that is, again, be very mindful of our own self. So I'll start with number 10. The number 10 thing is just to identify and recognize your own thoughts, feelings, and actions about everything that's happening, right? So you first have to be aware for yourself what's happening to you, right? And do the work that you need to do for yourself, okay, before you can even be a support to someone else. So just be mindful of what's going on with you. So the first thing, be a listening ear, right? And so oftentimes when people are struggling or dealing with their stuff, there's potentially a lot of shame attached to that. There's a lot of feeling of anxiety attached to that, not sure who to talk to, not sure who to turn to. And so when people are coming to us and sharing their experiences, sharing their struggles, and sharing the things that's happening to them, it's important that we listen. And a way to listen, we must be silent, right? Interestingly, the same letters in listen is also in silent. So to listen to what people have to say, we have to be silent. right? In that silence, we can and be attentive to what is going on with them, what they're saying. And with that, the goal is to seek understanding, right? In seeking understanding, which would be number two, is seeking understanding as to what the person is going through, not from our perspective, right? Because there's some things people tell us we may not fully understand. We may not fully be able to put ourselves there because that's not our experience, and so sometimes we can't fully understand something when we're looking at it through our own set of eyes. And so, in seeking understanding, it's important to kind of try to understand from the person's perspective. And sometimes it's important that we ask questions in seeking understanding. So, first, it's important to listen. And in order to listen, we must be silent, right? To hear what's going on with them and to try to seek understanding to what they're saying. And in seeking understanding, again, we may ask questions, okay, to get an understanding of what's going on. And as we're hearing that the person is saying that they're struggling with whatever's happening to them, it's important that we encourage, right? Encouragement by offering them hope. And ways to encourage people is to encourage them to seek help, seeking support, seeking guidance. And that could look in a lot of different ways, right? And so when someone's coming to us with mental health issues or with us already knowing that they're struggling with the mental illness, if they're coming to us with those knowledge, if they're coming to us saying they're struggling with depression, if they're saying there's anxiety and they're seeing things or hearing things, or they're unable to cope, or they're feeling lack of motivation, or they're unable to get up in the morning, they're feeling they don't want to do anything, or feeling as if they're not sure what they're doing in this world. If these are the things that we're hearing from those individuals, again, encouraging to seek help and guidance. Again, professionally, right? Professional help. There's people out there, that's what they do. It's my job as a licensed professional counselor to work with those individuals and provide a treatment plan and work through their mental health issues and work through ways to cope with their mental illness. So there's people, that's their job. In the same way, if we are dealing with our diabetes, we go to the doctor. If we're dealing with I don't know, lots of things that we could be dealing with medically, we go to those particular experts to work on those things, right? So there's all kind of medical types of experts. So in the same breath, when people are saying they're struggling emotionally, right, there's experts out there to help them deal with their emotions, provide them with tools, provide them the opportunity to work through some of the experiences, their trauma, their the things that they've been through, to kind of give them some insight, some understanding as to what's happening with them. And so it's important that we encourage that. And so in encouraging individuals to seek help, again, we're trying to take away the shame, right? Oftentimes, again, when people are coming to us with certain type of struggles, we want to dismiss what they're going through. We dismiss it by saying, oh, it's no big deal. We may dismiss it by saying things like, you just need to pray more. You just need to work harder. You just need to do these things harder. And yes, all these things are things that can be helpful. However, seeking professional help and seeking treatment is also something that is an additional resource, and that is something that can be helpful. So definitely encouraging people to say, hey, sounds like this is something you're struggling with. How about you seek and go talk to a psychiatrist, or you could talk to a psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, a social worker, a family therapist. So there's all kinds of individuals and experts out there that work with individuals with mental health and mental illness, and particularly trauma. So that's a lot of my expertise. My expertise is working with individuals who have a history of trauma either through childhood or trauma at any parts of their life, who's experienced trauma in any parts of their lives, and to help them get some understanding of that trauma and to help them work through all the emotions that's attached to that trauma. So that is a lot of my expertise in what I do with individuals. And so, yeah, encouraging individuals to seek professional help. So again, be a listening ear, seek understanding, and encourage individuals to seek help. Another thing we can do, a fourth thing, is to educate yourself, right? So as people are saying, hey, I am struggling with depression, or I've been diagnosed with depression, I've been diagnosed with bipolar, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, with anxiety, with PTSD, with ADHD. The list goes on and on in terms of symptoms that individuals may have, and again, a diagnosis that is attached to those symptoms. And so when people are saying these are the things that I'm diagnosed with, that I'm struggling with, educate yourself, and as they're educating themselves, because that's also a lot for an individual. A lot of my clients, when we're talking about specific diagnosis, I sit with the book and kind of go through those diagnoses with them so they have an understanding what that means. And not only that, an understanding, but then to also know this is, the amount of people that may also be struggling with this same diagnosis, who may have this same diagnosis, or what that looks like. And that just gives a better understanding for individuals. Okay. And not only that, when there's a language to things, that it makes us coping and dealing and accepting things a lot easier as well. Okay. So educating yourself of the diagnosis, of treatment, of resources that's out there so that you can assist the individual. Okay? So that's something else we can do. Another thing, which is a big thing, is validating the individual's experience, right? Validating their experiences and their feelings, and not shame or dismiss. Again, when people are coming to us and sharing their experiences, we often want to shut it down. We often want to dismiss it as if it's no big deal. And really validating what the individual is saying, no matter what it is. And again, to validate someone, again, doesn't always mean we understand, because we're not always going to understand everything that comes in front of us. But to say, oh man, it sounds like you're having a difficult time. It sounds like this has been hard for you. Right? And so in what you're hearing, it sounds like the person is struggling with whatever they're struggling with. It sounds like you've been really, really sad. Right? And so how can I help? And so, again, we don't have to understand and fully get something to validate what the individual is going through. But we don't want to dismiss and not take notice as to what they're saying. Okay, so we want to validate their feelings. We want to validate their experience, because with people's experience, two individuals may go through the same type of experience, and the outcome of emotions could be totally different. How they take that experience can be perceived, can be received differently. And so, although I may have experienced the same thing as them, and I say, oh, it may not be a big deal for me. However, if that individual is identifying it as a big deal, as a big concern, oh, wow, sounds like that was really tough for you. And making sure we validate what those individuals are going through. Okay? And the experience that they're going through, right? And so, again, this is another big talk in terms of with the Black Lives Movement and the protests and everything that's happening, is some individuals not understanding what the Black community is going through and dismissing it as if it's not a big deal, right? And so, although you're not experiencing that, but what we're going through is still very valid, right? So I don't have to experience what somebody's experiencing to know that, to validate what they're going through. Okay. Thanking the person for sharing. Again, when people share what they go through, it's never easy. It's never easy for people to share, because there's always the concern of judgment. People are worried about judgment. People are worried about being ostracized. People are worried about being treated differently. People are worried about criticism. So there's lots of things that make people don't share, that make people hold back, that make people pretend, wear masks, right? So there's all these things that we do. And so when people are feeling vulnerable and sharing whatever it is that they're going through, in sharing that, you know what, they've been suffering with depression, they've been suffering with anxiety, trauma, whatever it is, when they're saying these things to us, it's definitely important to thank them. And although it's my job for people to come and sit and talk to me, I always want to make sure that I let them know to thank them for sharing, Because just because you come sit doesn't mean you share, doesn't mean you're comfortable in doing that. And so for people to be vulnerable in doing that, I thank them because I took a lot. And with that, it gives people permission to be able to share, to talk. So as they know that you're listening, as they know that you're validating, then it allows them to be able to share and talk to you and to be open to receiving support and encouragement and help. Right? And if appropriate at times, if you've experienced your own struggles, definitely share some of that, right? Oftentimes when people are going through something, they often think they're going at it by themselves, right? They often think they're alone in their experience. And so, again, when people start to share their experiences, they could see, oh, they're not alone. And so it's important that we do that. And in sharing our experiences, we share our how we support, the ways that we're supported, things that we do that help us. And again, we can learn from one another. So it's important that we share our experiences. Someone asks, what are some steps someone going through trauma can take? So some steps individuals can take is first, well, I guess first it's identifying that you are going through the trauma. So that's great, right? So acknowledge it, right? Acknowledging something is really, really important. And it's important that we do that because very often when we're going through things and we're experiencing things, we tend to also dismiss. We're also dismissing how we're feeling, how we're dealing with things, right? In dismissing it, we kind of put it away, right? So it's kind of like this is us inside of us. We're putting these experiences, we just kind of put it away, and it's put away, right? But what tends to happen is when we're putting everything away, it's building, right? We put one thing away, two things, three things, and everything we're putting away, now this is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And so if there was a little bit of trauma, now it's gotten to be a bigger trauma. If there was a little bit of anxiety, it's gotten bigger. Everything's just gotten bigger and heavier, right? And so it's important to kind of keep it from sticking in there and going in there and getting buried. It's important that we acknowledge what it is that's happening. And so, great, you're acknowledging that I am experiencing trauma. Oh man, because of everything I'm hearing, every time there's something happening around me, I'm a little bit more hypersensitive. I'm looking behind my shoulders. I'm finding that I am feeling a little anxious in my body when this is happening, right? And so being mindful of that. And so the steps that we can take is first to acknowledge, and depending if these experiences are creating a lot of distress in your life, then it may be important now to start seek counseling, right? To have an expert to provide some additional resources to help you work through that. And so when we experience trauma, of course, self-care is important. Being mindful of the thing that's creating the trauma, how to minimize some of those things, right? So if every time I watch the news, it heightens my trauma, then I may stop watching the news. I'm very intentional with how much of that I let in, right? So being aware of those things. I know that meditation is something that helps calm my body. If I'm in the middle of the trauma, then I may calm my body, right? Meditate, yoga, breathing. Breathing is something else that's very helpful. Being mindful of the breath, right? Being mindful of the body. Aware of the thinking patterns. So something else to be mindful of when we've experienced trauma is what's going on with the way we're thinking, what's happening with our thoughts, right? Because we can create thoughts that intensifies the trauma. So again, just becoming aware of what's happening to your feelings, your thinking, and your actions. Acknowledging what's going on versus burying what's going on, and then seeking professional help if we need to as well, and doing self-care things. So those would be some steps that I would say to take. Okay. The eighth thing would be in the ways to support someone with mental illness or with mental health issues or trauma is to make sure that we're including them versus isolating or ostracizing, right? So oftentimes people who are dealing with their mental illness or who's struggling with mental health, they're again already feeling like something's wrong, already feeling as if they're isolated or different, right? And so it's important that as somebody who's there to support them, that we make them feel included. into things and not push them away because of whatever or because of this. That doesn't help the situation. It makes it worse. And so we want to include them. And sometimes we may need help in how to do that. So the other thing I would say, the other thing I would say too, is to ask people how they want to be supported, right? Because we all need different things, right? I remember I had a client when she was struggling with her thing. Her parents were oftentimes asking a lot of questions and just constantly asking her things, and that wasn't helping. It was kind of creating more of anxiety and more issues. And so she just wanted them to kind of check in. She liked that they were checking in, but she needed it to be done a certain way so that it was useful and it didn't feel overwhelming. And so then it became a conversation between her and her parents. And so again, as we're supporting people with mental health, with trauma, we want to have a conversation. Well, how can I support you? How can I help you to be your best? How can I help you to work as you're working through these things? And listening to some of that, right? Listening to what they're saying, and having the boundaries and limits with that. Yep. So, and then the last thing I had said, which is kind of how I started, is to recognize your own stuff, right? So again, if I'm going to be a support to someone, I also have to know what's happening with myself, right? So I have to be aware of my thing. And so sometimes in supporting others, we can become overwhelmed. We can become frustrated. We can start to feel as if we're burdened, right? And so we have to pay attention to what's happening with ourselves too, so that we can be a proper support for those individuals. All right. So just to recap, the 10 ways that we can show support to someone with mental illness or someone struggling with mental health or dealing with a trauma, because we're in a state of a lot of chaos right now. And so there's probably going to be a lot of people coming to you and wanting to talk and wanting to deal with things. And there's ways we can be supportive, and there's ways we can be hopeful, and we can be encouraging to them. Okay, so be a listening ear. And again, in order to be a listening ear, you must be silent, right? Seek understanding, and not seek understanding through your eyes, but seeking understanding through the individual's eyes, what they're going through. Right? Seek understanding. Encourage individuals to seek professional help. Educate yourself about the mental illness, about the trauma, about whatever it is that they've identified as the issue or as the mental illness that they're going through. Okay? Validate their experiences and their feelings. Thank them for sharing what they're going through. Thank them for including you in whatever it is that they need. So thank them for that. Share your experiences and share how you've worked through certain things, so then they can see, oh, they're not alone in whatever it is that they're going through, and that other people are going through some of these things too. Include them versus isolating, so making sure we're including people and we're not engaging or acting in ways that is shutting people out, that is ostracizing people, but including them. Ask them how you can be a support. Okay, so involving them in how they want to be supported. So asking questions, right? And lastly, recognizing your own thoughts, feelings, and actions, and what's happening in your body as well. Recognizing your own stuff, so you know how much you can handle, and how you're, and that helps us to know how we can support and be there for someone else. Okay, so those would be the 10 things I would say. Hopefully this was helpful to individuals, and thank you so much for listening in to Ask the Therapist, and I will see you next time. And again, for any of you out there, if you guys have certain topics or certain questions that you guys have, definitely seek me out, my DM, and definitely if you're finding that you yourself is struggling with either your own mental illness or struggling with your mental health issues or trauma, because there's again so much happening, acknowledge that, own that, and seek the help, seek the support. And there's resources and help out there. Okay? Thank you so much for listening, and have a good evening.